Good morning, namaskar, and welcome to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to worship together in community at Cedar Lane Unitan Universalist Church online. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, one of the ministers serving this religious community, and I welcome you to worship this morning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you're joining us from, whatever your beliefs, gender identity and expression, immigration status, political views, or life circumstance, we welcome you to worship. This religious community is a place where we come to learn more about being human in this world at this time. We believe in life before death and in supporting one another on life's journey as we strive to live lives of hope, joy, integrity, and in service of a life larger than our own. A very special welcome to those joining us for the first time today, including some of my friends from California and in India. A very special welcome to you. Please let us know in the live chat where you're joining us from. And thank you for taking a chance and taking the time to join us for worship this morning. If you're new or feel new, you're invited to complete the newcomer form that is linked here in the chat. And if you've been attending for a while and feel moved to become a member of this beloved religious community, please reach out to our membership and communications coordinator, Nicole Kazi. Our next new member recognition ceremony will be on Sunday, October 18th. We look forward to welcoming you to join our movement. Our pastoral visitors are an extension of our ministry team. They're available in the chat today to support you. Thank you for your ministry. I have a couple of quick announcements. Please join us on Zoom for our first congregational town hall meeting convened by our Board of Trustees on Tuesday, October 6th at 7 p.m. October 6th at 7 p.m. to hear more about the state of Cedar Lane, the challenges and opportunities that we face together as a religious community in these times, and how we can all be agents of change as we continue to build the beloved community within, among, and beyond. It promises to be a wonderful and engaging meeting. We hope to see many of you there. Also, if you're feeling moved to show up at Cedar Lane and be on campus, join us on Saturday, October 10th, between 8:30 and 10 a.m. for a physically distanced, masked grounds cleanup day. Please dress for the weather and bring gloves. Tools will be provided, or you can bring yours. You may RSVP to Joan Riggs or Linda Giannessi. Their contact information is being posted in the chat. Friends, it is so good to be together this morning. This is the day we have been given, and so let us be glad and turn and welcome and greet our neighbors.
Our opening words are from Mahatma Gandhi.
If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope.
It is possible to live in peace.
Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being.
It is possible to live in peace.
Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain.
It is possible to live in peace.
If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions.
It is possible to live in peace.
If we are to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, then we shall have to begin with the children.
It is possible to live in peace.
The future depends on what we do in the present.
It is possible to live in peace.
Good morning. Namaste. I'm Leslie Vossen, the worship associate for today's service. I'm lighting my chalice in Silver Spring, Maryland. As I read our chalice lighting words, I invite you to share in the chat where you are lighting your chalice. To face the world's shadows, a chalice of light. To face the world's coldness, a chalice of warmth. To face the world's terrors, a chalice of courage. To face the world's turmoil, a chalice of peace. May its glow fill our spirits, our hearts, and our lives.
Hi, my name's Kieran. Hi, my name's Sky. And our theme today is Gandhi's birthday. Let's see what's in our wonder box that reminds us of Gandhi's birthday. Oh, look, it's salt. Salt reminds us of Gandhi because the British people were taxing the poor Indian people. So Gandhi marched so they could get their own salt. Let's watch the video, Be the Change.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Once upon a time, not long ago, there was a boy who would grow and become a great soul. He lived in India, and his name was Gandhi. He believed in human rights, and he fought for equality. He felt so strongly that he trained himself, cause he realized first he'd have to change himself. He changed his clothes and decided to walk. Some days he practiced silence and refused to talk. When he was young, he studied to be a lawyer, and then he became a great spiritual warrior. He read from the scriptures of every religion and came to the realization that we're all God's children. Because he understood that we're all equal, he became a spokesman for the people. A karma yogi devoted to service, to spread truth and peace was his purpose. You gotta be the change that you wanna see in the world. Be the change, just like Gandhi. Be the change that you wanna see in the world, just like Gandhi. Dedicated his life to the cause, even when it meant breaking unjust laws. He often faced prison and incarceration, but that only strengthened his determination. He said he would make every sacrifice, but that he would never kill or take a life. He used his heart instead of his fist, and he taught non-violence as the way to resist. A peaceful soldier who used his mind to fight for the rights of humankind, but not just people, animals too. In his basic teaching, light that shines bright inside of me and you. Be the change. Be the change that you wanna see in the world, just like Gandhi. Be the change. Gandhi taught an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and it takes more strength and faith to be kind. With that in mind, Gandhi took a stand against the foreign occupation of his land. When things got violent, Gandhi would fast, not eating for days until the riots would pass. But the biggest event that made the British halt is when Gandhiji decided to harvest salt. The British Empire installed a salt tax, and stealing salt was an unlawful act. So Gandhi and his peeps took to the streets, 10,000 deep, they marched to the beach. But when they arrived, they were beaten with clubs, but they didn't fight back, instead they chose love. The foreign military realized they were wrong and eventually decided to go back home. You see, Gandhiji was a very great leader, but before all that, he was shy and meager. As a young child, he was just like you and me, before he became Mahatma Gandhi. The word Mahatma, it means great soul, and it's inside of us just waiting to unfold. If you follow your heart and act real bold, next time it'll be your story that's told. Be the change. Be the change that you wanna see in the world, just like Gandhi. Be the change. Be the change that you wanna see in the world, just like Gandhi. Be the change.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Each Sunday, we are invited to engage in the never-ending cycle of giving and receiving as a spiritual practice through our offering. We have an opportunity to share our personal abundance with our faith community as our hearts are filled with gratitude for all that we receive. Connection, challenge, inspiration, beauty, the list goes on. Our offering is a living embodiment of our covenant with each other, with ourselves, and with the larger community. You can give by the electronic means of our modern times, text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or by mailing a check to the church. Our offering to sustain the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. Let us center ourselves, inviting our mind, body, and spirit into this space made sacred by our presence and the presence of the holy in which we live, move, breathe, and have our being. In this sanctuary of caring that connects us across space and time, we hold in our hearts those for whom parenting is a primary spiritual practice. Those who are mourning a loss, those who live with grief and chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, those with mental illness and addiction, those who have suffered abuse and injustice, those who have experienced job loss or face financial insecurity. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with Lou Mayo and Susan Duke on their wedding at the Cedar Lane on September 19th. Congratulations, Susan and Lou. We rejoice with Cynthia Robinson and her entire family. Last week was Adoption Day, and the truth of their hearts was codified by the official channels. We congratulate Rich Madaleno on being confirmed as Montgomery County's Chief Administrative Officer by the County Council. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to those whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by violence, calamities, and the COVID-19 pandemic in our nation, in our world. Especially this week, our caring extends to those in national leadership in their surrounding circles who have been impacted by coronavirus. Holding them, holding all the joys and sorrows we bring, let us join our hearts in prayer or reflection. Spirit of light and love, we come to you with gratitude that we may bear witness to all the ripples of life that blend and dance with each other, the joys and sorrows, the heartache and celebrations. We ask that you fill each heart with compassion to soothe our wounded souls. We ask that you send us a spark of inspiration to bring creativity and joy into each life. And we ask that you guide our righteous anger towards deeper work for justice and equality. In the name of all that is holy and just and compassionate, we pray. In the silence of these moments, those who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of a loss of a loved one are invited to rise and or share their names in the chat. Blessed be.
A number of years ago, when I was living in New Delhi and working for the American Embassy, I was invited to an annual ceremony in honor of Gandhi's birthday. It was held at Birla House, where Gandhi spent the last days of his life before he was assassinated on the 30th of January in 1948. Birla House is now a museum where you can see his room with a simple white mattress on the floor, his walking stick, a low desk, his spectacles, and his spinning wheel. Gandhi usually walked in the garden in the afternoon and then said prayers with all who had gathered there. When you walk through the garden at Birla House, there are cement footsteps, so you can take the steps Gandhi took to the place where he was killed. A column now marks that place that Nehru later said was where the light has gone out of our lives. I am calling him Gandhi, but as I remember correctly, people in India rarely called him by his name, Mohandas Gandhi. He is called Gandhiji, the honorific G giving respect, or he is called Mahatma, which means great soul. When you see the photos of Gandhiji at Birla House, you are struck by how small he was and thin from the many fasts he had done. And yet that frail body contained a great soul. We sometimes forget that Gandhiji fought for more than the freedom and independence of his country. He believed in the rights of women, and by the end of his life, he wanted to see the dismantling of the caste system, a system that labeled some individuals as untouchable at their birth. But most of all, he believed in the fundamental truth of all religions of the world, saying that a study of other religions was a sacred duty. Which is why that day in the garden at Birla House, his birthday was celebrated with an interfaith prayer. On the dais, facing the audience, were Hindu priests with the sacred thread across their chests, Muslim imams, a Franciscan friar, the priest from New Delhi's Episcopal Church, Sikhs in their turbans, and Buddhist monks in saffron robes, and Buddhist nuns with shaved heads and white robes, and representatives of Jainism, and a rabbi, and Parsis, and Baha'is, all gathered together to pray for the great soul. Perhaps it is because of the ecumenical nature of that gathering. The words for me that best describe the Mahatma's effect on the world are not the words of one of his countrymen, but the words of a Hungarian Jew. Hanna Senec was a poet and resistance fighter in World War II who was captured and executed. Senec wrote, "There are stars whose radiance is visible on earth, though they have long been extinct. There are people whose brilliance continues to light the world, even though they are no longer among the living. These lights are particularly bright when the night is dark. They light the way for humankind."
गोपालबालं ఖచ్చితమణి ఘంటికా పటల నీలదేన విభ్రాజమానం కటిఘటితమేఖలా ఖచ్చితమణి ఘంటికా పటల నీలదేన విభ్రాజమానం కుటిల పద ఘటిత సంకుల సింజితేనతం కుటిల పద ఘటిత సంకుల సింజితేనతం చటుల నటనా సముజ్వల విలాసం చటుల నటనా సముజ్వల విలాసం భావయామి గోపాలబాలం మనసేవితం నిరతకర కలిత నవనీతం నిరతకర కలిత నవనీతం నిరతకర కలిత నవనీతం బ్రహ్మాది సురనికర భావనా శోభిత పదం నిరతకర కలిత నవనీతం బ్రహ్మాది సురనికర భావనా శోభిత పదం తిరువేంకటాచలస్థితం తిరువేంకటాచలస్థితం అనుపమం హరిం తిరువేంకటాచలస్థితం అనుపమం హరిం పరమ పురుషం గోపాల బాలం పరమ పురుషం గోపాల బాలం భావయామి గోపాల బాలం మనసేవితం తత్పదం చింతయేయం సదా భావయామి గోపాల బాలం మనసేవితం తత్పదం చింతయేయం సదా
Thank you, Swapna, for that beautiful song celebrating and extolling the many qualities and virtues of Krishna or Gopala. And it is a real joy to have you be a part of our service this morning. Today, we honor and celebrate and remember and recommit to the message and the work of Mahatma Gandhi, and focus especially on his concept of Satyagraha. Satyagraha was fashioned and molded by Gandhiji in South Africa. It was on September 11th, 1906, that Gandhiji launched the first Satyagraha campaign from the Empire Theatre in Johannesburg in South Africa. Standing before a crowd of over 3,000 people, he issued a clarion call for nonviolent resistance against racial discrimination, oppression, and injustice. And there he described Satyagraha as a force born of truth and the love of nonviolence, a moral equivalent of war. And after spending 21 years in South Africa, where his views took shape and were tested and refined, Gandhiji carried the torch of Satyagraha to India. And the world witnessed with amazement how this unique technique energized millions of Indian people to bring the mighty British Empire to its knees. So what is Satyagraha? Satyagraha is made up of two words, Satya, which in Sanskrit means truth, and Graha, which means firmness or force. Gandhiji discussed it as saying, Satyagraha is literally holding to the truth, and it means, therefore, truth force. It excludes the use of violence because people are not capable of knowing the absolute truth and therefore not competent to punish. The idea behind Satya is that truth alone exists. For truth is not what holds good just at a certain time or convenient time or place and under certain conditions, but that which endures, never changes. Evil, injustice, hatred, bigotry, Gandhiji argued, exist only insofar as we support them. They have no existence of their own, he said. Without our cooperation, unintentional or intentional, injustice cannot continue. So for Gandhiji, truth and God were interchangeable. God is truth, he said. Truth is God, he also said. By this, he meant that integrity and truthfulness will lead an individual to the realization of God, the absolute principle, and also that truth must, in the end, prevail in human interactions. So his campaigns of Satyagraha were regarded as an active struggle against injustice in which ultimately truth was bound to triumph. Gandhiji defined Satyagraha's principles and applied them on as large a scale as possible to show their efficacy and effectiveness. But all the while, he made it clear that Satyagraha, like ahimsa or nonviolence, needed to begin at home before extending to the community, to institutions, to countries, and to the whole world. He developed Satyagraha with common people in mind so that its power would be accessible to the average person. And since it was founded on the most fundamental law of human nature, unconditional love, it required no special training, only an intentional commitment. As Joan Bondurant explains, in Gandhiji's Satyagraha, dogma was exchanged for an open exploration of context. Nonviolent action was taken not to assert propositions, but to create possibilities. The method was designed to open new options and demand the opponent make a choice. And this was done while participants continually examined their own motives. The whole process was pervaded by a spirit of giving the opponent the courage to change and releasing the hidden potential of mutual goodwill. Gandhiji's Satyagraha campaigns included that against the famous salt tax in 1930, the one that Kiran and Kailas so beautifully described to us, which was perhaps the most trenchant example of the combination of ahimsa, satyagraha, and sarvodaya, which means the uplift of all. This was focusing on an issue carefully selected by Gandhiji to achieve maximum publicity for the cause of India's independence. It is a defining example of using escalating militant and unarmed confrontation to rally public support and to affect change. It is also a case in which the use of symbolic demands, at least initially, provoked ridicule and consternation from everybody, including the Congress Party and the British. But it was brilliant because defiance of the salt law was loaded with symbolic significance. Next to air and water, Gandhiji argued, salt is perhaps the greatest necessity of life. It was a simple commodity that everyone was compelled to buy and which the government taxed. The fact that Indians were not permitted to freely collect salt from natural deposits or from the sea was a clear illustration of how a foreign colonial power was unjustly profiting from India's people and its resources. And since the tax affected everyone, Hindus and Muslims, Sikhs and Buddhists, Christians, and those who had no religion, rich and poor, young and old, the grievance was universally felt. The fact that it most heavily burdened the poor only added to its outrage. The price of salt charged by the government, biographer Jeffrey Ash writes, had a built-in levy, not large, but enough to cost a laborer with a family up to 2 weeks' wages a year. So it was a textbook moral injury. And so when Gandhiji marched 247 miles to the sea, it grabbed the imagination of the people. Throughout the country, huge numbers of dissidents began panning for salt and mining natural deposits. Buying illegal packets of salt, even if they were of poor quality, became a badge of honor for millions. I think that was the turning point in the Indian freedom struggle when the British lost their hold over the country and ultimately led to India gaining independence on August 15, 1947. So Satyagraha is not an abstract idea. It is not a mechanical formula or an abstract theory. It is a positive and active form of resistance. It is a sole commitment to actively protect one's life force, prana, from being contaminated by hate and fear. It is an internal transformation during which one learns through serious and sustained discipline and practice to detach one's energy from violence, to refuse to participate in it even in the private recesses of one's own mind, and to commit, to recommit, day after day, peace, compassion, and love. So Satyagraha is not a veneer that the justice seeker or the peacemaker puts on as one would a shirt to achieve certain ends with a sense of moral superiority. Instead, it is a way of being and living that combines ahimsa, nonviolence, courage, humility, creative power, and non-cooperation to a political and social system regarded as immoral and corrupt. So, friends, the question is Satyagraha relevant today, especially here in the United States? Now, the answer is not a simple yes or no, because it is one of the paradoxes of the 21st century that while the establishment of peace has become the world's single greatest imperative, the traditional instruments of preserving peace have been found to be increasingly ineffective. Whether it is systemic racism or religious nationalism, economic inequality or militarism, environmental devastation or pandemics like COVID-19, all of them have become powerful drivers of conflict in today's world. There is no doubt that we are in great need of a new paradigm for solving conflicts and bringing a new way of being with one another and in the world. But the question to ask is not whether Satyagraha is relevant or not. The real issue is whether we have the courage, the strength of mind, and the will to apply it in our lives, individual and communal. As people who seek to bring forth goodness and wholeness, who are committed to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, who are promoting the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part in all that we are and all that we do, it benefits us to take up spiritual disciplines and interior practices that help us confront and purge violence, to speak and act and think violence in our own hearts, and to cultivate and show compassion for others. If we do not do it, we're also enslaved and cannot help free anyone else. So, excuse me. As we all know, President Trump has been hospitalized at Walter Reed Hospital after he tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, I've been really struggling, finding it really, really hard to show sympathy for someone who rarely shows it to others in his public life. Not to his political opponents, not to children put in cages and people held in detention camps at the border, not to women and girls he has degraded at every turn, not to Muslims here and across the world that he has demonized, not to GLBTQ people whose hard-won rights he has sought to dismantle, not to people of color who he has demeaned and dehumanized, and not to people protesting systemic racism and police killings of Black people. The malice and hate, the prejudice and bigotry he seems to bear taint not only what he says and does, but has also sought to destroy the very fabric of our democracy. It is hard to show sympathy to someone who cheated on his taxes, paying only $750 in federal taxes in his first year in office and barely anything for 15 years before that. It is hard to show sympathy to a serial liar. It is hard to show sympathy after his cringeworthy debate performance last week in which he didn't want to condemn white supremacists, and that he and his enablers will do anything to retain and enlarge their power. And it gets really, really hard when we consider the president's incompetent and irresponsible handling of the pandemic. Trump has muzzled and disputed experts at the CDC, promoted crank cures, held maskless campaign events, and encouraged followers not to wear masks. And all of this has contributed to over 7 million people being infected with the virus and cost over 210,000 American lives. So where does all this leave those of us who want to feel some compassion for our political enemies, but feel deeply and sincerely challenged by people in our world responsible for immense levels of human suffering? Well, I found myself sitting and struggling with the words of Gandhiji when he was asked why he chose to love his enemies even when they did harm to him. Gandhiji said, and I quote, "Ahimsa means the largest love, the greatest charity. If I am a follower of Ahimsa, I must love my enemy. My appeal to you is to cleanse your hearts and to have charity. In the application of Satyagraha, one must believe in the possibility of every person, however depraved, he said, being reformed under humane and compassionate treatment." Thank you, Gandhiji. So, even though it is really, really hard, as an act of personal satyagraha, I am praying for President Trump and the First Lady. I wish them a full recovery, and for all those who also have been infected. I pray for the 210,000 Americans who have died from the virus, and for the recovery of the millions who are infected. I pray for the day when all will receive the same kind of excellent health care that the president currently is receiving. I pray that the president also recovers from the mendacity and the arrogance with which he has ignored science and public health warnings and those who are suffering. I pray that God would invade his heart in such a way that he condemns white supremacy and systemic racism in all its forms. I pray this experience challenges him to revisit his priorities and life choices, leads him to let go of his narcissism, and to lead with more compassion and kindness in the future. I pray that Majority Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans will take up a full and comprehensive relief package during the greatest public health crisis in a century, instead of hypocritically rushing through a Supreme Court nominee to fill the seat of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May her memory be for a blessing and spark a revolution. And I pray justice for Breonna Taylor. May her memory and the memory of all those killed by police be a revolution that dismantles white supremacy. And I pray, in the words of my colleague, the Reverend Jake Morrill, that all of us, scarred and hardened and divided and exhausted after years of outrage, come together again and again as one nation, committed to the well-being of every last one of our neighbors and care for all those who suffer, whether in low or high places. May our greatness be measured not in our wealth and power, on how skillfully we can smear others, but in our unyielding integrity, grit, and compassion, and in our resolve to create communities where everybody can thrive. As we seek to bless others, even at this late hour when so much has been squandered, but hope hasn't yet been snuffed out, may God bless us all. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, life-sustaining, in the name of that revolutionary and courageous love that will not let us go, let us down, nor let us off the hook, I pray, Shalom, Salam, blessed be, Om Shanti, Amen. May it be so. Before we close our time together, I'd like to thank everyone who helped make today's service possible. Dana Edwards, Leslie Wasson, the Boyle family, the Rajendran Dharm family, Dr. Jasmine Lee, our Cedar Lane choir, and our guest musician Swapna for that beautiful song. Thank you to members of our AV team and visual arts team, Mike Morse, Don Woodruff, Barb Thompson, Michael McCrigger, Todd Chernikoff, and Rebecca Knocktree. Thank you to our membership coordinator and our pastoral volunteers who've been active in the live chat. Friends, fans, and members of Cedar Lane, please join us with your favorite beverage for a virtual coffee hour after the postlude. We look forward to seeing you there and continuing these conversations and having some social time together. The link for the coffee hour is in the chat. And friends, please join us next Sunday at 11 a.m. to regroup, recharge, and restore with the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, Dana Edwards, and our fabulous music ministry team. Our benediction today is a prayer from Mahatma Gandhi. It is actually from the Isha. It was one of Gandhiji's prayers that he chanted every day, which says the entire universe is pervaded by the divine. For this reason, enjoy whatever is given to you by the divine and do not seek wealth from any other source. May all be well. May all be peaceful. May all be fit for excellence. May all be whole, and may no one suffer. Peace, peace, peace. Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena chaktena bunjida magrudah kashya svidhanam. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Lord.